Freedom is not free. Discover what it takes. It's time to tap and move forward.
Hello and welcome to Tap and Move Forward. I'm your host, Lyn Shelley. Today's episode is a little different. First, I need to announce I will be moving to an every other week episode schedule. I love doing the interviews and producing the podcast, and when I started, I really didn't understand everything that it took to produce a podcast. So now, after 7 months, this will make it easier for me to maintain and to continue giving you valuable content. So look for the next episode in 2 weeks. Also, this is the first Friends of the Military episode. This episode comes from a supporter of the military who has developed powerful skill sets that can really empower you in your career. Today's guest is Lyn Christian. She is a master certified coach from the International Coach Federation. She is certified in Conversational Intelligence. She's former director of innovation at Franklin Covey Coaching and former ambassador for the World Association for Business Coaches. I had a fantastic time with the interview, and it is full of incredible advice and practical skills you can apply to develop yourself. For today's skill set challenge, you can pick any of the activities that Lyn recommends. Now the interview with Lyn Christian. So Lyn Christian, I'm really excited to have you. We met a while back. I decided to try out a fencing class,
Yes.
which was an amazing experience. I had so much fun, and I got the chance to work a little bit with you, and you stood out right away. I mean, honestly, all the instructors stood out. They're exceptional instructors.
They know what they're doing.
Yes, amazing. I felt so empowered after that one day, but I noticed right away that when I worked with you, you gave me something very specific to focus on that I had control over.
Right.
So it's my very first lesson. Obviously, I can't just come out of the gate being an expert with the sword. But you told me to focus on staying calm. And I right away noticed just the way you were working with me and everything. Like, these are the kind of things that I try to talk to with my new recruits.
Right.
And that value. Can you just speak more to why you would give me that to focus on?
Right. Well, to be clear to the audience, I am not an instructor or coach. This is my third year of really trying to learn fencing, and my second year of competitive fencing. And so I got into your shoes and could see where you were and said to you something I wish someone would have said to me, which was, in this open fencing, while we're being mimicking combat, what's the one thing you want to focus on? Because you can't focus on all the complexities of fencing in your first lesson. And you would, you were keeping your shoulders high, and the way that you were sort of jabbing instead of attacking or retreating, it fit for you to just say, okay, I'm just going to stay calm. And the reason that I was supporting you, A, that's who I am, but B, it's also, we can't help each other do better by making each other feel worse. So if I just spent my time on the strip beating you up, which would have been easy to do because you were new, I wouldn't have left edified. You would not have left edified. But instead, if we could have a conversation around, look, you have new neural networks that are wanting to blossom here. You're picking something new up. So let's give them a chance to have at least one thing click, where this neuron over here connects with that neuron over there. And it may not be a super high rate way right now, but we have a little ditch that we've started to dig that says you can build on this and start to understand how to do this sport better. And, I would come home in my first year of fencing, picking it up, in my late 50s and wanting to move away from endurance races. I was a sprint triathlete. I'd done some of the Spartan races. I actually podiumed in those sports. And I wanted something that gave me longevity. So I'm looking at you going, gosh, if you're going to enjoy this and you want to start to grow, then you have to start growing a neural network and not go home like I did for my first year with bruises and wondering, why am I putting myself through this, but having an inner calling to do it. I wanted you to have more of a positive experience. So that's the reason I spent my time with you. I was just showing up as who I am and supporting you to do one thing different in something you wanted to learn to do.
You said a lot of really important things in there. One of the things I want to talk about is you talked a lot about creating a new neural network.
Right.
And let's say, for example, there's a new recruit, someone that's either just going into basic training or they're in a new unit, and there's a lot of struggle in that it's a completely new environment.
Right.
And they may or may not have somebody that really wants to edify them and help them create that neural network. So how can somebody who maybe doesn't have that environment still create that for themselves?
Right. And sometimes it's hard to create it for yourself, but you're hitting on a couple of things. One is to be patient with yourself. You're in a new environment. So it's sort of like when you buy a brand new car and you have to learn, now where are the turning signals and where is the emergency brake and how do I turn on the washer and how do I adjust the mirrors and how do I turn on the stereo, which is the first thing some people do. Versus, you can move through that very quickly. Within a matter of days, you've acclimated, or a matter of weeks, you've acclimated. But in a new environment where you've completely changed how you eat, when you eat, where you sleep, how you sleep, who's in charge, how do you speak, there's a whole set of rules. You have to be patient with yourself in realizing this is not just like a car that's going to take 1 or 2 days. And so you need to also realize that you have to do less of what you used to do and more of what you're going to do in the future. Instead of thinking of it as, I'm just going to flip a switch, like I do with the binary system of a light switch. You have to think, okay, what's the one thing I'll do less of, because that doesn't work here, and the other thing I need to do more of, and actually give yourself a tally sheet. If you keep a journal, if you keep a day book, if you keep some kind of handwritten record, and you can make your own graphs, you can chart it any way you want to. It can just be free writing reflection. As soon as you start engaging that, you're going to be more creative. The RAS, the reticular activation system in your head, is going to say, oh, you're writing about this. It's important for us to notice when this happens in your life, no matter what it is. We run into the reticular activation system whenever we decide there's a new make and model of car we want. And then it starts showing us that there's more of it on the freeway than we thought. So you want to start programming yourself into having a chance to say, I'll do less of these things that don't work in this new environment and more of these other things. Pick 1 or 2, probably 1 at a time, because that's how our brain focuses. Journal about it. Notice when you're changing that. Give yourself a time limit of, or even just give yourself the patience of saying, okay, when I get to this percentage of doing it, I'm going to go to the next thing. So one, you have to be patient with yourself. The other thing that you said is critical. If we look, let's just go to Gallup Management, business-oriented company that's studying what good managers do. And they studied companies, they studied businesses, and they found out that what really great managers do are 12 consistent things. Things like, do I make sure that my reports are clear on what we're doing? Do they have the skills, the knowledge, and the materials to complete the mission that we're accomplishing? But one of those things of the 12 that's a little deeper down, not on the top 2 or 3, is there somebody at work that cares about me? Is there that significant person? So if you're a new recruit and you're coming into this new environment, you do need somebody who cares about you. And if they're not on the inside yet, have them be on the outside. We all do better when there's just that one person that looks in our eyes and we know they've got our back, they care about us unconditionally, they believe in us, and that person's going to stay true to us. And if we need to call them, email them, text them, they're going to respond, because that person has become somewhat of a mentor or a coach or a link to our belief in ourselves. And that actually in neuroscience is a beginning of having your identity solidify around being a soldier. Believe it or not, when you can connect with somebody who sees you, because sometimes we don't know who we are, till we see ourselves doing something, and that something is reflected back to us by the eyes, the ears, and the words of the person who saw us doing it or experienced us doing it. And when they play that back to us, it connects to a part of our inner being, either the neurons in our heart, because we have 40,000 sensory neurites in our heart. Literally, it's an organ with a complex neural network in it that sends more messages to the head brain than the head brain sends down, and the head brain obeys and listens to these messages. The gut, the enteric system, from your back door all the way up to the back of your throat, this enteric gut system has 500 million neurons, and the head brain has 86 billion. These are our best estimates today. So you're more than just your head. And when somebody connects to your heart and your gut and to these neural networks and to who you are inside, a bit of your identity sparks. And every time you have a fresh beginning, you graduated from high school, fresh beginning, who are you? You're joining the military, fresh beginning, who are you? You can write about these things, you can journal about these things, you can track these things, you can remember these things that people are giving back to you, and hold on to those, because those are pieces of your biggest, boldest, brightest identity being reflected back. And somebody sees your truth and then hands it to you. And when they care about you, you know you matter. Like Matt Lieberman tells us in his work, Social, the book Social, that we are hardwired to need connection more than anything else. We will experience physical pain. We will forego eating if we can have that connection. And so I think it's really vital that you asked that question, that you picked up. There was somebody in the class who looked at you and said, yeah. And of course we have the first same name and we spelled the same, so there's that connection. But I could see you were trying, that you were getting it, that you were enjoying it. So instead of trying to win and take advantage of your novice status, I could see, no, this could be a peer. And so that appealed to you. And so I was giving you something that would help you get better. And so you want to have your eyes, ears, and radar out for who are those people. And if somebody doesn't just rise up and volunteer, you may want to flatter the hell out of somebody by asking them if you can recruit them to be your mentor or your sounding board.
I love that you bring that up, and because I was just talking about this recently with someone. You should never have an excuse. So there's people enough around, and if you don't have someone that immediately stands out, then there is ways to start engaging people in order to get that type of response.
Yes.
And I even noticed that when I was deployed, I ran a number of 5Ks. Mm-hmm. And there was one girl that was in the Army that she just was running all the races I was. And after about the first mile, I would always catch up to her, and then I'd give her a hard time that she couldn't let an old lady pass her because I was obviously older than her. And we would spend the rest of the race just pushing each other.
Right.
And we ran a number of races that way. And the last race, she was like, you've been an amazing help for me. And I was like, this is my last race, I'm going home. And she was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with you without you. Right. And I was like, pay it forward. Find somebody else.
Find somebody new. Great advice.
Yeah, but like there were a lot of times when I wanted to quit. I was reaching the speed that I wanted, or the distance that my body really wanted to go, but I wanted to keep going, and to create the support for me was almost to just help somebody else, pushing them along as well.
That's the spirit of that connection, the teamwork. We all are wired for it. We all are. Yeah, beautiful story.
Can you talk a little bit about what your job is right now?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you where I've come from. So I started as a 6th grade school teacher.
Really?
Yes. Before that, I was planning on going to college and becoming an attorney, because in high school, I was on a debate team 3 years in a row, and we did really well as a team. We took different places in state and won a lot of debates. But the thing that stood out for me was, in every debate, out of the 4 debaters, 2 from the other team and our side, I had the highest speaking points. So I looked at that pattern and thought, well, that tells me that I'm good at debate. I should probably go get a degree in law. But at the same time, I was sort of struggling with an addiction in high school, and something that I was able to get away from at an early age. But while I was enthralled in that, I was also playing in sports. And I was out training one day for this team sport that I was playing on. And I was jogging, and I was just I was trashed. And so I sat in the gutter, literally sat in the gutter, and went, I can't keep up with this training today. I did something pretty destructive last night to myself. I thought, what am I doing? And I looked up, and across from me was the elementary school where I had gone as a kid. And in my mind's eye, I remembered 3 teachers who had really sparked, back to this theme of having that important person, sparked something in me that I was like, why am I going to go debate? Why am I going to go argue for a living? Why am I going to go get trained in something that at the end of the day, that's not going to feed me? Like might feed me is to inspire other people like these teachers did. So I nixed that plan and went into elementary ed because of these examples. I taught for 15 years and I was an award-winning teacher, but it wasn't the right place for me because I was innovative and I thought outside the box, and I could see that our children needed to be more than a test score, that there were so many things they were struggling with socially, emotionally, mentally, spiritually in their families, that there were so many things that they had to deal with that I never had to deal with as a child, and that those were not being addressed by the educational system. And so I couldn't be part of a system that was failing our children. So I left and made a jump into business. And during that jump, I just went to the best network person I knew in my neighborhood, and I just said, Lisa, if you were going to move from academics to business, who would you have help you? And she said, my business coach. And I was like, what's that? So I met this business coach. I loved her life. Like, I walked into her office. It was in her home. She had a hot cup of tea. She'd just come off the mountain. She had her hiking boots on. She was just having an interview with me to see if I would be a good fit for her. And I thought, wow, her commute's like a minute. She got to hike this morning. She's designing her own work schedule. She's empowering people. And then I noticed as she was talking to me how much personal growth she had. And I asked her, how did you get to a position where you think and talk and act like this? And she says, well, I studied a lot with HR. She was a former HR executive. But she said, really, the refining piece has been this coaching. And I've been studying that for the last few years. So I hired her. She helped me make a transition. I got into business, and then I took some of my savings, and I was a writer and developer on a project management team that was creating products for a well-known, Franklin Covey is the company here in Utah. And it was a productivity company. And so part-time, I would go to school in the evenings and whenever I could get a class, because it was all online. And I eventually got my coaching. And I didn't do it, my certificate, I didn't get that certificate so I could coach. I got it so I could do personal growth. But by the time I'd finished graduating, I had a couple of clients and I was doing really well with it. So I decided to create my own business after a while. And when I left corporate America, I was director of innovation for Franklin Covey Coaching. I'd risen up the ranks from this little writer and developer position to project manager to associate director over a project management and innovation center to being director of innovation over the coaching group. I'd finally earned my master's certification in coaching. I had a whole career waiting for me in my office because I'd built enough of a network that I already had enough clients that I could just leave my director job and walk across to this other job. And that I'd created for myself. And guess what? I work out of my home. I can go hiking. I can do what I need to in the morning and come in, have a fresh cup of coffee or tea, and start inspiring and motivating other people. So I do what I do because I believe that I want to live my life and I want to earn my living by doing things that inspire me. And that's how I got here.
Wow. That's a great story. Wow. And you've even spent some time motivating, inspiring, and helping military recruiters.
Most recently, yeah. So here's a couple of stories. The first one was, and I can't divulge names because there's some confidentiality here, but I got recruited to, actually got sponsored to be in the early days when Mark Twight had just finished the 300 movies and had created these Spartans in Hollywood. And Mark Twight's a former extreme alpinist, and you can see he's reinvented himself. Back in the day when he created Jim Jones, I was his business coach. I was his entrepreneurial coach. And when I finished coaching him, he said, that was such a great experience. I want to sponsor you in my gym. I'd never been in a gym before. I'd stayed active. I mean, I was an athlete in high school, and so I would jog, I would mountain bike, I'd play basketball with the kids. I'd stayed active. I would cross-country ski in the winter, but I didn't ever attend a gym. And so when he invited me, I was like, well, this is a great opportunity. I mean, this is a world-class gym. The Navy SEALs are here, all kinds of military personnel, Secret Services come here, firemen and firewomen, people who need functional fitness are in this arena. So I got to know this gentleman who was working in the Air Force, but also trying to get recruited into the NFL. And I worked side by side with this guy and really appreciated what I saw happening at Hill Air Force Base in his life, because he would tell me what was going on. And he'd played college football at Air Force. And so we'd work out together. He even came to a Bikram yoga class that I was at, because we were talking about our recovery regime, and I snuck in. I actually broke a rule. I had to leave early before they threw me out, but I snuck into the combines and got to watch him try out, and Philadelphia Eagles picked him up. And so I've always had a great respect. My father was a Marine, and some of my favorite stories was from him telling me about serving and honoring country. And so anytime I get recruited to speak, I've coached, I've trained military. I got to work with the recruiters with the Utah National Guard and work with them on how to focus their time management. And what I respect so much about the military is how it gives structure. It's kind of like why I went into coaching. It gives a finishing school, place where you can have camaraderie, where you can be challenged. It gives you a chance to learn how to be polite and how to respect. It gives you a chance to think outside the box and solve a problem and serve your country. It's an edifying thing to be in the presence of soldiers and the military, because you're giving your lifeblood, your time, your energy and talent, and sometimes your actual life for the benefit of something I value more than anything, which is freedom. And you do that because of courage, which is another part of my core value system. So anytime I can talk to the military, I take my hat off to you. I have great respect for what you do. And I'll tell you, my father recently passed away, and I handled everything through his passing with grace and charm and the right amount of emotion. But I just fell apart when the color guard did taps, because I could tell that he was a jarhead. He wanted to go to the Marines. He made it into the Marines. He was a tough little nut. He never lost that sense of self that was the Marine. And I know that made him a better man throughout his life. And so when the color guard did their thing, I just fell apart, because I knew that even at his late age in the 80s, 85, he still considered himself a part of the military and a part of what was bigger than himself, which was this guard of these freedom fighters and this guard of individuals who would stand by your side and be ready to courageously put it on the line.
Are there ways that he impacted you, or that his military service impacted you?
Well, yes, and I think the one was that he felt like, of course, this was his prejudice and his opinion. He felt like getting to the Marines was a cut above for him. That was a cut above, and he wanted to see if he could challenge himself. And so I think I took that standard of, well, I can go and I can train for these triathlons, because I'm at Jim Jones and they're telling me if I want to stay and be sponsored, I have to get in competitive sports. And I'm like, okay, so what's the cut above? The cut above is I got to push myself, because at that point I didn't know how to swim. I almost drowned as a child. So I did not know how to swim. And I thought, the thing that I can do is challenge myself to do a sport that will require that I swim in open water. So that's got to be a triathlon. And so that piece of finding something that you think challenges you just to go one step above. And for him, it was that. It was also, he didn't want to just have horses. He wanted to have thoroughbred race horses. He didn't just want to have a dog. He wanted to have a German short hair that would hunt. And so I think I've taken that from him. And I think it started with his stint with the military, because his family was so poor and his parents did not support him that even though he was a good athlete, they didn't support him. They didn't fork out the money for him to play basketball or football in high school. But there was nobody keeping him from entrance into the military. And so he got some of his identity from that. And I feel like that pushing yourself to take on a challenge that seems maybe above your head was something that he instilled in me.
Do you have any thoughts for somebody who maybe struggles with leaning in to that challenge?
Yeah, so not every challenge that's before us is like, if courage is one of your core values, let's say if you're driven by courage and challenge, then bungee jumping off a great big tall bridge might be ludicrous. It's like, okay, so why are you endangering your life? Is that really the challenge you want? Lean into the challenges that grow you as a human being. Because I'll tell you what, there's no better way to grow your self-esteem than to do something that you even wonder you can do or that scares you but excites you at the same time. So if you have a challenge that scares you a little, excites you at the same time, and you know it's going to be good for you, better than eating all your spinach, do it. You will grow in ways you cannot imagine. It will change your neurochemistry to have a deeper identity with something that you didn't know you could do. It will help you start to trust yourself because you've made transparent what you're made out of. So I would say yes, if it's not a ludicrous challenge that's just for the hell of it, and you can see it will leave you a better person and the people around you better, take that chance. There's no better way to grow yourself and to actually gain more self-efficacy and trust for yourself and to show yourself what you really can do.
I would even add that my experience with you doing fencing was that way. It's something that I had wanted to do for so long.
Yeah.
And I just had never taken action on it. But looking back, and it was such a great experience.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's like, on one side, I wish I would have done it sooner, but on another side, now I've tried it. And it's not that
so
looming in the back of my head, like, could it be fun? Is it going to be too hard? You know, all of those questions where it can kind of keep people stuck in that debate as to whether or not you quote unquote should do it. But if it's something you really want to, then just making the step and going ahead and trying it.
Do it. Yeah.
And I was lucky because I found out that the initial class was free. So I was like, there's absolutely no reason for me not to try this.
Low risk, low entry point.
Exactly.
Go try it. Yeah. So the thing I would say is often we don't know who we are till we see what we can do. And that mirrors that experience back. I can't emphasize that enough. I work a lot with people who are reinventing who they are. And when you enter into the military, you're reinventing who you are. And each year as you go through the military, you have a chance to reinvent that because you can move up in the ranks or you can try new things. But here's the deal. What you did was smart. I mean, I picked up my first foil in college. And I told myself, because I was about ready to graduate and they invited me to be on the team. And I was like, well, I'd have to go get a master's degree and I don't want to stay in college that long just to fence. But I promised myself someday I'll come back to it. So when I realized that if I stayed in the endurance races, I just eventually ruined my body. You can't do that large muscle recruitment of swim, bike, run forever and not have it take a toll. And then I went to the Spartan races and I was like, it's similar. It's going to do the same thing. So then my idea was, then go to fencing. Remember, you told yourself you wanted to do this. And I found out that the foil might not be my sport, but the épée, and then I found my coach. I used that first year of just challenging myself to go to one lesson a week. So that first year was just me getting into the orbit of that new thing and getting a neural network of, on Wednesdays, I go to fencing. On Wednesdays, I make up home bruised. Okay, now I get a kit. Now I own my first épée. Okay, now I actually have the gear. I have the body cords. I have the shoes. I have what I need. So I didn't really take it. I just got in the orbit and let myself orbit around that for a year. And then I went, okay, now I'm going to start competing. And I did that for a year. And now it's like, okay, now I'm going to try to get to nationals. And I'm trying to go up some ranks. So just up the ante each time. And so if there's something new that you want to try, again, it's not like a light switch. You don't have to just turn it on and off. Just get in the path, get in the track, and say, I'm going to start doing more of this thing and less of staying home on Wednesday, or I'm going to do more of this one thing and less of that other thing that doesn't get me where I want. You don't have to do it all at once. And your neural networks take a certain amount of chemical buildup and electrical charge before they fire and make those neural networks. So you just have to persist. Keep at it.
There's something important that a little piece of what you were saying when you were talking about when you join the military or throughout your military career, you're reinventing yourself, or
Yes.
there's a chance to reinvent yourself. I think that's what you said, was there's a chance
Or
for
an
you
opportunity,
to do. There's
yeah.
an opportunity. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because there are people that will join that are very stubborn or that are very dedicated to staying the same. And so there's a difference between allowing it to affect you or to learn from it and being resistant to the experience.
Right. So whenever we're resistant, and if you look at my bio, you'll see that I've been studying where coaching and neuroscience intersect. I've even gone to Australia to study multiple brain integration with Oka and Suzalu. Most recently, I've been working with Judith E. Glaser, who recently passed away from pancreatic cancer. She was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and told she would live maybe 3 months. And she lived almost 3 more years because she was applying what we know in neuroscience to herself. And basically, here's a nutshell. If we find ourselves resisting something, we have a pretty good reason. Doesn't mean that we should stay there. Sometimes it might. But we have in our brainstem the natural wiring to say run away or freeze or appease or fight. So if you're resisting something in that brainstem, or even in your limbic brain where your amygdala is, where that's sentinel looking out, because it's stored all your emotional history, looking out to see, am I safe, am I not safe? You go into a whole new environment. You're changing your life. You're getting into the military. There's a certain amount of risk. There's a certain amount of responsibility. That can scare the shit out of anybody. And if they're not willing to admit it, then they're not actually being honest. So you might resist some things because that part of the brain that's really primitive is trying to keep you alive and in survival and saying, I have to protect myself. I have to protect myself. I have to stay safe. And when you're in that scenario, you withhold information. You withhold yourself from going into things. Instead of sharing and joining, you're trying to seclude and stay safe and insulate. So we do a lot of things out of survival. What you'll want to do is find those 1 or 2 people you can start to trust and allow it to be something that gets you into your neocortex, which is a place right where you pat the crown of your head. That's the neocortex in the brain where it stores knowledge and information, does analysis. Start to learn something new. Just open yourself enough to say, I'm just going to learn some new facts or some new data or some new information. And eventually, then here's an exercise you could do, is get into the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal lobes of our brain, that's our executive brain, our highest evolved brain. It's right behind the third eye chakra in your forehead. That's where those neurons can actually connect to your heart and start to trust. When those neurons fire and connect with the neurons in the heart, we build trust. When they fire with the ones in the gut, we get courage to take new action, to change, to mobilize, to actually reveal some of our deepest identity. But to get to that place, you sometimes have to do exercises to get you to be willing to trust and co-create and experiment. So know this, knowing something is less. It's inferior to being willing to discover and experiment. And if you need to put yourself in that prefrontal cortex so you can access your most true part of yourself, your bravest, strongest, boldest, badass part of yourself, you'll want to start doing this exercise over 30 days. And that is, write out 100 aspirations, 100. And don't stop till you get to 100. And an aspiration is a heart dream. It can be as pedestrian as someday I want to have a Scotty dog, or someday I want to be able to hold hands with my significant other and take walks 3 or 4 times a week. Or it could be as big as, at some point, I want to be a 5-star general. At some point, I want to be able to say that I've written a book. Whatever it is, they can be small, big, medium, but you have heart dreams. In order to access those, you're going to have to get in that prefrontal cortex. You're going to have to access the heart and the gut. And this is an exercise that helps move you away from the resistance of security and safety and I protect into the neural networks of I can be a we, I can be part of a team, I can have high trust, I can be in the flow with other people, I can co-create a solution. It's never been imagined before because I am in a network of connection with other people. So this 100 aspirations is a really great exercise that I usually give my clients. That of course, if you go in and you're scared and you find yourself resisting, catch yourself and go, I'm being critical, judgmental, and resisting because I have a good reason. Acknowledge that. And then decide if you want to stay there. Because if you stay there, your experience will be subpar. And your knowledge of yourself will be subpar. And what you can discover will be very, very limited. But if you want to expand and grow and really be a badass, get into that front. Find a way to start trusting yourself and others. And this aspiration exercise is a good way to start.
It's brilliant. I love it. Are you saying every single day you write down 100 or over 30 days you get to 100? Good distinction.
Great question, Lynn. So what I did, Judith E. Glaser was my mentor when she was teaching me. And you can find her, she spent 40 years bringing to the world this conversational intelligence, which is her intellectual property. She was the innovative thinker of this in the world. And so she gave me this assignment in the fall of 2017. And we'd been working together since January of 2017. And she pushed me on this one and she challenged me. So I got a journal and I gave myself 30 days. So I kept that journal in front of me. And instead of listing them out like a list, I made thought maps or thought bubbles or bubble maps. You can Google that to see what that means. Because that's the way your brain works. It's more in a network like a bubble map or a thought map. Mm-hmm. And I just started listing out. Okay, today, here's what's coming up. And I did some in my professional life and some in my personal. So I divided them into 2 maps. And I gave myself enough time to say, okay, I've got about 30 days. It took me 32 to complete it. But I wrote a little bit whenever they'd pop up. And they'll pop up in the shower. They'll pop up when you're driving. They'll pop up when you're listening to music. They may pop up when you pull up in your journal and look at it and go, okay, what am I going to write today? So some days I might write more, some days fewer. But I gave myself that consistent time to go to that journal. I kept it open on my desk so I could see it. And my reticular activation system was aware now, oh, you're looking for aspirations. All right. Because I'll tell you, 10% of your aspirations may come from listening to other people talk about their goals and their dreams, and you decide to adopt it.
What's interesting is I think that there's people that, or even for me, that I would have in the past felt a little trepidatious about writing those out, because then you start listing the things that you haven't done yet, or the things that you're never going to do, or that you're telling yourself maybe you'll do, but you don't believe you'll actually do. But what I hear you actually saying is that the more you list them and make them apparent to yourself and writing them, the more that you are developing trust with yourself and the more likely you are to start engaging and making them happen.
Right. And so now I'll spend time, here we are in the spring of 2019. Now I go back and I review them once a quarter and I check off or put a little green circle by those that are in process because they're go. And I'll check off the ones that I've accomplished. And I realize I won't accomplish all of them because we're ever evolving. I mean, the lining in our gut is brand new and the new cells are changed. Every 18 months, every cell in our body transforms and changes. So we are always reinventing. We're always becoming something new. And so I realize that as I look at those, some have come true, some are coming true, some will never come true, some will yet come true. And I don't try to sequester them into goals. I'm just noticing which ones happen and being so excited that I planted a seed by just doing this experiment. And someday I'll probably look at the maps and go, time for a new one. And I may transfer some of those things over. I may not. I don't know yet. I'm willing to discover instead of know. But I will do this exercise again and put myself in that prefrontal lobe again.
So just to be clear, it is 100 over the 30 days?
Yes.
Okay. And you talk a lot about the neural network and the way that the brain works. Mm-hmm. Do you have any recommendations for someone who wants to know more about that, where they would start? Any books?
Yeah, I think Conversational Intelligence by Judith E. Glaser is a great way to understand how to use neuroscience in your everyday conversation. Because the quality of any culture, either the one that's inside of you, your culture, the soup that you live in all the time, or the culture that you work in or play in or share a family in, the quality of that culture is dependent upon the quality of the relationships, either with yourself or others. And the quality of that relationship is dependent upon the kinds of conversations you're allowing yourself to have, the ones you're not having, that you will not allow to have, and the words you're using, even with yourself. And so it all comes down to the neuroscience of words, because words are not things. They are the symbols and representations we use to make sense of, to think about, and to process what's happening inside of us, and then to share that reality with other people. So I think that's a great place to start, because it is embedded in everyday neuroscience and will help people understand neurochemistry that's going on in them day in and day out, even in a nanosecond, when they go from cortisol to oxytocin to dopamine.
I think that's a really important distinction, that we realize that words really are just a way that we use to navigate the energy and the emotion that's going on inside of us. I think that's a really important distinction.
Well said.
So on your website, you have this great article that's 3 steps to becoming a badass.
Yeah.
I don't think it says 3 steps to be.
But there are 3 basic constructs. Yeah.
Right. So number 1 is be true.
Yeah. So what happened, Lynn, was just before I turned 50, people started calling me a badass. And I was like, okay, why? I don't have tattoos. I don't drive a Harley. Haven't beat anybody up. Like, I think about, I'm not Einstein. I'm not Mother Teresa. I'm not Rosa Parks. I haven't done something that is worthy of being called this heroic badass. But people are calling me that. And I did my research, and it came to find out it was just because, it was a scientist who one day I was trying to process some strong emotions, and so I just went climbing the steepest mountain I could find as hard as I could, threw myself at that challenge so I could process in my mind, in my neurochemistry, what was going on, and I wrote about it. And she said, "You're formidable, Lynn." And I looked that up and went, oh, that's the word for badass. What makes me formidable? Well, the 3 things that I coach people to do. The first construct is be true to yourself. And how do you do that? Well, a couple of ways. 1, you find out what your core values are, and you live like that's your guiding compass. That's your North Star. That's the constellation that helps you make decisions, make choices, decide when to take a stand and how to take a stand. And also getting your needs and wants met. What are your needs? We all have individual needs. I have a need to motivate and inspire people. I have a want to be able to have the freedom to interact with my family as often as I want. So when we align with our core values and we get needs met so we can reach our wants, we really turn into somebody who's being true to themselves. The next one is be strong. Be strong involves a couple things. Find your strengths. We all have a set of strengths. We're all really good at something that we love doing. I'm not talking about the time when you're really good at something and you hate doing it. We're good at things. Sometimes they're latent, so they have to be developed. But there are talents and traits and skills that all of us uniquely have. That if we find those and we grow those are like superpower muscles. We can leverage our career and our life off of those. Ignore the weaknesses. Just manage against your weaknesses. But nurture, grow, and lead with your strengths. And also be strong enough to throw the bullshit flag on yourself when you find that there are behaviors and actions you're doing that need to change. So be strong. And the last one is be focused. You can be true and stand in your integrity, follow your core values. You can be strong and leveraging your strengths. But if you can't manage yourself out of a brown paper bag, you're not going to get shit done, and you're not going to be a badass. So you have to learn how to focus, and there are a couple of things to do. Make sure you have a daily planning regime. Make sure you do long-term planning, and make sure that you learn how to focus yourself. We all have different needs. Some of us have ADD, some of us have ADHD, some of us are hyper-focused on things and we go too deep. So learn a way to manage your focus because where your focus goes, so does your time, your energy, your talent, your strengths, and your integrity. And is that in a good place? So when I work with my clients, those are the underpinnings of everything we do. If you're being as true and as strong and as focused as you can be, you are an everyday inspired badass. And that feels great. It does great things for yourself, your life, your success, your sense of contentment, your relationships, and it changes the world one person at a time.
So there's pieces that I want to talk about in each of those areas, just to go a little bit deeper, because and
I know we're running short on time.
Oh, are we?
Yeah, maybe what we need to do.
Oh yeah, we are. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that went fast. Maybe
that
what we need to
go
do
crazy
is
fast.
We can do another session.
I would love to. This is
then you can
amazing
hone in
content.
Well, thank you, and you can hone in what you want to ask, because we can keep going as long as you're interested. So let's do that, because this is a great cutoff point.
Yes, absolutely. So,
Awesome.
Lyn Christian, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your insight, your experience, and all that you had to offer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
I hope you enjoyed this episode and found a new mindset to help you excel. For more information on Lyn Christian, visit www.soulsalt.com or www.tamfpodcast.com/soulsalt.